Hello, thank you for joining tonight's Artist Pathways conversation, co-organized by the Cincinnati Art Museum and OhioDance. Thank you to all who stayed on following Countess V. Winfrey's talk, and welcome to those of you just joining us. We're hopeful that this conversation will be a helpful resource for artists seeking performance or exhibition opportunities, funding, commissions, and your participation helps us to make this the best resource it can be. Art Museum and OhioDance. Thank you to all who stayed on following Countess V. Winfrey. Now, I know why we have that little bit of a feedback issue, so I'm going to pause and ask our panelists, if you currently have the audience view open, please do close it. Opportunities, funding, commissions, and your participation helps us to make this the best resource it can be. Museum and OhioDance. Thank you to all who stayed on following Countess V. Winfrey. Now, I know why we have that little bit of feedback. I'm hopeful that we have worked through that. Let's see. Sounds like we're great now. Thanks, everyone, for your patience. So we hope that this can be the great resource that it can be, and to that end, we invite you to submit your questions using the Microsoft form that's available on the event page. Ask your questions at any time, and we will respond to as many as we can during the Q&A segment. My name is Emily Bauman. I'm the Curatorial Assistant for Photography, and I'm a member of the Curatorial and Learning Interpretation teams at the Cincinnati Art Museum who are serving the exhibitions David Driscoll, Icons of Nature and History, and Working Together, the Photographers of the Kamunge Workshop. Our conversation tonight is part of the Black Futures series, which is created in partnership with Artworks, Cincy Nice, OhioDance, the Robert O'Neill Multicultural Art Center, and Wordplay Cincy. The series is inspired by David Driscoll and by the photographers of the Kamunge Workshop. Engaging local Black visual and performing artists, the series includes events and programs centered on mentorship, building creative opportunities, and telling and keeping underserved histories. The Black Futures series is supported by LPK and GBBN. Additional support has been provided by the Ohio Humanities, the National Endowment for the Humanities, and the Federal ARP Act of 2021. Please visit cincinnatiartmuseum.org for more information about the series. In just a moment, I will introduce Rodney Veal, who will moderate tonight's conversation and will in turn be introducing our wonderful guest speakers. Several months ago, I reached out to Rodney to ask his thoughts about approaching the commission of a new dance work to be realized at the Cincinnati Art Museum, an opportunity for a choreographer to create work that is anchored in response to the legacies of David Driscoll and the photographers of the Kamunge Workshop. That friendly request for advice eventually led to the museum's partnership with OhioDance and to the announcement of an adjudicated call to artists. In the adjudication process, we realized this exciting opportunity to share insight into this process, to open a window to ideas, to suggestions and wishes from the folks who serve as adjudicators or on grant decision bodies. Guiding us in that conversation is Rodney Veal. Rodney is an independent choreographer and interdisciplinary artist who serves as adjunct faculty and career community coordinator for Sinclair Community College. He's a graduate of Eastern Michigan University with a BS in Political Science and Visual Arts, and received his MFA in choreography from The Ohio State University. Veal currently serves as president on the OhioDance Board of Trustees and additionally serves on the boards of Levitt Pavilions Dayton, Homeful, WYSO, and Dayton Live. And of course, he can also be seen as the host of the Emmy Award-winning television series, The Art Show on Think TV and CET Connect. Rodney, over to you.
Okay, thank you for that wonderful introduction. Wow, it was such a great opportunity to connect with the museum and work on this project and bring all these wonderful people together. And I want to thank you for that. And I'm going to do something, I always believe in conversational. So I'm going to read the bios of these incredible, incredible human beings. And I'm going to start off with April Berry. April, wow. Okay, first of all, folks, April is a dance director, master teacher, educator, and formerly internationally acclaimed principal dancer with Alvin Ailey American Dance Theater. She was born and raised in Queens, New York. She began her professional training in ballet at the National Academy of Ballet and Theater Arts in New York City under the founding direction of Talia Mara, also the founder of the prestigious International Ballet Competition in Jackson, Mississippi. Barry was a company apprentice with the Dance Theater of Harlem under directors Arthur Mitchell and Carol Shook, and has danced with ballet companies in the United States, Switzerland, and Italy. She studied modern dance, jazz technique at the Alvin Ailey School in New York, and has worked closely with some of the most celebrated choreographers and dance artists of the 20th century. Barry was awarded a research grant while teaching at Denison University in Ohio to study African Caribbean folkloric and popular dance forms at the National School of the in Havana, National School of the Arts in Havana, Cuba. She's honored to be one of the world's few certified master teachers of Dunham technique, having successfully completed all certification following extensive work with the American dance pioneer, Dr. Katherine Dunham, learning straight from the source. Barry has served on the board of OhioDance and the Greater Columbus Arts Council, and as Director of Education and Community Programs at Ballet Met in Columbus, Ohio, and at North Carolina Dance Theater in Charlotte, North Carolina. Barry was founding chair of Dance USA's nationwide community engagement and education directors affinity group, and is currently the director of community engagement and education at Kansas City Ballet and faculty member in the Kansas City Ballet Academy. That is April Barry. So we move on to Chiquita Mullins Lee. Chiquita is an arts learning coordinator at the Ohio Arts Council, where she manages the Arts Partnership and Big Yellow School Bus Grant programs. She also coordinates Ohio's Poetry Out Loud National Recitation Contest. Chiquita has served as the chair and Midwest Regional Coordinator for the Arts Education Working Group in association with the National Assembly of State Arts Agencies, and has served on the Arts Education Review Panel of the National Endowment of the Arts. Involved in local theater, Chiquita writes and performs with Wild Women Writing and leads Word Warriors Creating Writing Ministry at New Covenant Believers Church. She has won individual Arts Excellence Awards in fiction, nonfiction, and playwriting from the Greater Columbus Arts Council and the Ohio Arts Council. Her nonfiction, fiction, and poetry have appeared in literary journals, and her work is featured on the PBS American Portrait Project. All these connections that we have in our other lives. I love this. We're going to move on to Tamara Williams, is an assistant professor, University of North Carolina at Charlotte, earned her MFA from Hollins University. Her choreography has been presented internationally in Serbia, Switzerland, Trinidad, Jamaica, Mexico, Brazil. Moving Spirits Incorporated is Williams' contemporary arts organization dedicated to performing, researching, documenting, and producing African diaspora arts. Her scholarly work includes Giving Life to Movement, the Silvestri dance technique, Reviving Culture through Ring Shout, published in the Dancer Citizen, and the African Diaspora and Civic Responsibility, which is coming on publication. Thank you all for being on here. What I love about this fact is we all came from these different worlds, but we come from the one world, which is the arts. And specifically, we've been on both sides of the fence. We've received accolades, we've received awards. We've also sat on the part where I hate the phrase gatekeeping in the sense of panel discussions, selecting artists. So one of the questions I had in my mind, and I'm gonna go to my notes, is, when you're looking at these proposals, do you get what is the sense of how important preparation on the part of an artist who's submitting a proposal is to it being successful and it getting funded, which is basically what this is, getting funded and getting seen. So how do you feel about how much prep work does someone have to do to make something successful?
Well, I'll jump in.
you see the applications in full, so.
Well, I just want to start off by saying that, listening to Countess Winfrey, that was like a master class in how to create an effective proposal. I mean, it was brilliant. First of all, she started out with an idea that she had love and passion for. And that love and passion, that comes throughout she loves museums. She loves dance. She loves site-specific dance. When you start off with a passion for something that you really love to do, you're going to do your best to make it work. So she starts off at that. And then she does all this research. She researches the topic, the subject matter first. But then, in addition to that, you research the funders that you want to approach. If you, like with me, I work with the Ohio Arts Council. So if you research a specific grant program that you want to apply to, that's going to give you an upper hand. And then, yes, preparation. I mean, talk to as many people as you can. Spend time with the words that you're using to form the application. Get folks to look at it, to review it, to help you revise it. Collaborate with people who are knowledgeable about the subject matter and about what you intend to do. I mean, there's so much that goes into it, but I think because it is such a detail-oriented process, have as much support as you can in terms of collaborators. I'll stop there.
Oh, no, that's great. That's great. Anyone else want to chime in?
I totally agree with what Chiquita just said. Total agreement. But, for me also, language is so important in a proposal. And when I read a proposal and the language has the knowledge that they have looked at the work of the artists that they're going to be inspired by for their project, always speaks to me. And that was certainly in Countess's work. And also her philosophy and her concept, bringing together community and communion. When she said community and in communion with, that really resonates in a proposal because it's a broader vision than just the work that she's going to choreograph. It opens up the vision to all kinds of possibilities in terms of where that work and that project is going to go and how she is going to be informed by those artists and those images and those photographs that have preceded her and that she has researched and looked at. And so the proposal read that way. It read that way. And the language was a big part of it for me. Yeah.
Oh, yes.
I will agree. I'm just going to piggyback a little bit more deeper in what Chiquita and April have stated. The preparation and also answering the questions that were mentioned in the actual proposal it's such an important aspect, right? So doing the research and in Countess's work, she talked about the past, present, and the future, and it was fully thorough, each one, right? And so the research was clearly there. I will say, as you are allowing others to read your proposal, let other people who are not in your field read. So don't just give it to all dancers. Let maybe a banker read it, or someone that does accounting, someone that probably has no idea what a pirouette is, right? But you want them to read your paper, right, to get an understanding yet again about the language that's being used and if it can actually be translated for others who don't maybe speak that language.
And Tamara, I'm so glad you said that, because a lot of times, because Emily had mentioned I'm on several nonprofit boards, and most of them are centered in the presenting realms for the arts. And so I'm sitting on the board with bankers, lawyers, doctors, you name it, it's the spectrum. But they may have a love for the art form, but maybe not an innate understanding or awareness of the art form. And that's where it's really important, where the language is clear, so that it's clear to those who may be in the know and those who are just lovers from the seats and from the bleachers and from as an audience. And so I think that's really important. I wanted, because I think that's so critical. I think we all hit on that theme of language, and that's what spoke through Countess's and several others. And then not necessarily that they were, and that was that they were, not the word good applications. They were great applications, and there was great language and there were great ideas, but there was a clarity in the language, and that I think that clarity comes from sharing it with someone else. How important is that? Do you think it's how can we stress to those who present, who send proposals? I think we need to stress to them, you need to let other people read it. And unvarnished. unvarnished feedback is really critical.
I think it goes back to the community piece, because also it's not just who are audience members, but also who are not audience members. I always say the Jane and Joe on the street who may not yet be dance lovers or even arts lovers, but you're becoming accessible. You're accessing them where they are in the work. And everybody understands community. Everybody understands in communion with. Everybody understands their past, their present, and what they hope to be their future. Those kinds of things resonate with everybody, whether you're an arts lover, audience member, or you're not. And for me, in my work, when we're trying to engage community, we want to engage all community and not just those who come to the theater and the museum. So it's really important that we have accessible language. And in Countess's proposal, all the proposals were great, but as you said, Rodney, the clarity and the vision, I think what was so striking to me was that she had a real clear vision about where she wanted to go with her work. When she says it's an homage, but it's also what is now, what was, and what is going to be. And that really speaks to everyone, no matter who you are, where you are in your journey, right? So those proposals that are broader and in breadth in terms of looking at the concept and where the project is going to, where it all can go, the 3 spaces alone, using all 3 spaces, not just one space, and taking us on a journey with a narrator, a griot. This is something that in the African American experience we all cherish, and other cultures as well. That somebody's taking us on a journey.
Yeah, there's a guide, and the fact that, and I love that specific, that griot and that African American tradition of the storyteller. I almost felt in many ways that the dance is really supporting the storytelling, this other sort of vehicle and device, and I think that spoke clearly to the kind of work that she wanted to do, and it goes back to what Chiquita said about passion. If you're passionate about it, I don't want to say don't, but you probably should consider not applying if you're not really passionate about asking for this thing that you want. It's got to be very clear that you want this, and that you've done this legwork, because you can sense that when someone's sending a proposal, maybe not specifically in this round with the museum, and we'll get to the specifics of that, but in general, that sometimes I get the sense that sometimes people don't read the instructions. That it's be very clear who you're applying to and why, because when the language, and it goes back to language, but also that clarity of reading and comprehension of what they're asking for specifically. So how important, like how many times have we've seen where someone has missed the mark? They're talented, but they've missed the mark in the language. Is that, because that seems to be a thing that can really stop someone who's on a panel and adjudicating.
Yes, I'll just say to that question and the one before, as a panelist, I want to be able, as April said, to go on a journey. I want to be able to envision what it is that you're speaking about in your proposal, right? If I'm reading a book, storytelling, I'm in it. I'm part of it. I'm in this narration that's going on. And it's the same thing with a proposal. I don't think it's the best idea to have your panelists guessing on what it is that you're trying to say, because then we can guess anything and it may not be something that you want, right? And so we may be guessing that you don't maybe have all of it together, right? And so that's the place that you don't want. You want a really full researched you want, if you're a dancer, the embodiment of your dance is on the paper, and that's why it's so important to have others look at it so that it's legible for whoever's reading it. Mm-hmm. The story is really important.
That's great.
And different age ranges. I have found that in proposals, when different age ranges read the proposal, they read it interestingly, differently. An older person reads it different than a younger person. So yeah, for me also age manifests itself in terms of reading it. And answering that question, Countess said, the question was, why is Black art so integral to our Black future? That's one of the central questions of the proposal. And so to answer that question very succinctly, and not think about, well, what am I going to choreograph and how are my dancers going to dance, and not get away from the central question that informs David Driscoll's and the Kamunga Workshop's work is really central to your proposal, I believe.
I laugh because I feel like that's what got us like so excited, and Chiquita, because when we were part of the process, that we had joy on our faces when we discussed Countess's proposal. And when I even said, we're all smiling. This is bringing us joy. I mean, it was very clear. And so, I mean, what I loved about this, and the reason why we pulled this panel together, especially for Black creatives and Black arts professionals, the time I've always said that the time is now for Black creatives. And so what specifically to that audience who's seeking to send proposals and send out requests for funding, what are some things that they should be actively considering when they're proposing work? What do you think?
But they should be actively considering in terms of knowing that their subject matter is Black-oriented subject matter. But, I want to think about, this is whimsical, but a Black future where we have Black foundations, a preponderance of Black funders, that we have a place that we can go, Black-owned corporations that have very strong sort of community-oriented
There you go. There you go. I love it.
Right now, there is an open-mindedness, I think, and there's an openness amongst the foundations and the corporations and those who are, community-minded and have a commitment to diversity and equity and inclusion, all that. And that's a wonderful thing. Okay, that's 2022. And why is it taking until 2022? But okay, we'll take it.
Okay.
But, there are some Black billionaires, there are Black millionaires, there are people who have already created a path toward that kind of prosperity so that they can actually reach back and provide this kind of support for us. But in the meantime, then we go to these foundations that we know and these corporations that we know are supportive to these diversity efforts, research what they're looking for, because different people have different, a different focus depending on who they are and what they do. So look for those. That's one of the places where the research starts. Those funders that are going to support that kind of effort that supports, a Black vision.
Exactly. Wow. Yeah. So, I mean, I feel like that's so important because when we talk about supporting that, I feel like I called it the door has swung open in a way that seems like it's stuck open. And so for those who are applying, the theme that keeps coming back is preparation, language, that the sense of community, the clarity of what you want to say and convey about your work is that a stumbling block to us expressing that because we haven't been as experienced in the realm of applying that sometimes trips us up as Black creatives and Black arts professionals. I'm wondering, it's like, what do we say to those who may apply once and get rejected to what are their next steps?
Well, sometimes it's who's reading and looking at the proposal and what culture they're from. Because, some artists are used to having people that are not of their culture reading their proposals and not understanding their vision, the historical aspects and context that they're writing their proposal within. It also depends on who's reading the proposals,
right,
how they are received. As Chiquita said, having Black-centered foundations, Black-centered people that sit on arts councils that are reviewing these proposals. I mean, I know I sat on arts councils, and I can tell you there are many conversations that we had to have about, wait a minute, as the person of color on the council, I need to just insert this little historical and contextual fact because it wasn't part of the conversation because it wasn't a part of other people's experiences that were sitting on those panels. So that is so true that we have to have as the future Black-centered institutions, spaces and places, people and dialogue at the tables that are viewing these proposals and having these conversations on where the funding and the money is going. That's so important. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, very much so.
And I'd like to add that one of the things that the Ohio Arts Council has been focused on the last couple of years is really looking at how to be responsive to communities of color and shaping proposal, applications in such a way that they're responsive and having those grant panels that bring in, a diverse group of panelists, recognizing that there'll be a panelist who can look at an application and okay, this person has this idea, maybe it needs to be fleshed out a little bit more this way. And of course, nobody gets a pass, but at least, a recognition that sometimes the language is different, sometimes the perspective is different. And if we can recognize that, then maybe we will be a little bit more open to looking at, what they're proposing to do. But then it still comes back to the proposal writer to just make sure that they are prepared. With the Ohio Arts Council, if you're working on an application, call one of the program coordinators, reach out to somebody at that funder and ask them what they want. Sometimes they will give you either sort of draft reviews or a technical assistance or that kind of support. So recognize that that's available. You don't have to just kind of be, a lone ranger in this. There is
there's help. There's help. Yes.
Help is out there. So reach out for the help.
I love that. And that's so true. I remember the first time I applied for funding and I didn't get it. And I was, of course we take it very personal. You're sharing your work. But someone who sat in the audience when it came to the review talked to me about the language I used, but also the materials that I supported. And I thought that was very kind of them to be very brutally honest that it was subpar. I said, oh, okay, thank you. And so, it's just that I just feel like when you say that, it's so true and reaching out. And I don't think I've ever encountered someone who didn't want to help you in the process. And I think that's getting that over that initial hurdle of should I reach out and who do I reach out to? Is that I guess we are assuring our audience that you can do this. You can reach out to individuals to ask their advice and their opinions because it will help.
I would just say if you don't know, reach out. The worst thing they could say is no, so just be the person that receives a no and go to the next one until you get a yes. That's really what applying, auditioning, all of these things is about anyways, until you get your chance. And so in the span of time in which you're also doing that, you're also trying to tweak and clean and do the work on yourself as well, on your writing, on your narrative, as you're also trying to get through these doors and having people to maybe look at your work for you. It's really important. I just wanted to say something about Afrofuturism as well, because especially in Black culture, African diaspora, our traditions are oral, right? We can tell a story, like we can really tell a story, right? But that is not how you get the application in, right? And so, I work so much with the Gullah Geechee community here. My husband is also an Indigenous person. And if they were to turn in an application, any of these people, it probably wouldn't even make like the second round because of the language, because there is a barrier, a language. Geechee Gullah is a different language, and so I do imagine and hope for in the future that we don't just have this this westernized process of going through applications and just reading through and maybe looking at a video, but maybe we can take in some of these other traditions that come from Black tradition and for centuries and those things as well.
I love that. And I think you're absolutely right. I think that there's that westernization of the process. One of the things that I learned early on is that when you don't have access to the kind of materials for documentation of your work, that was really critical for me. So that became the foundation of why I pursued my master's degree at Ohio State, was to get a foundation of video technique and learning how to record and edit, because I felt like that was if I needed to know those skills so I could speak that language. But I also feel as though there's maybe an opportunity for us to also consider other ways of applications. I'm just throwing of maybe the application is someone talking about their proposal on video as opposed to it being written. I mean, it is 2022, and I think we're all living in the COVID bubble of the Brady Bunch Zoom screen. So I think that there's an opportunity for us to kind of consider that. And so we're throwing that out not just to those who present proposals, but those who look at proposals. Maybe there are alternatives. So I know
it does come down to money, though, too. I will say this: money and access to equipment. Even when you're videotaping yourself speaking, the lighting, the background, the equipment that you're using, working in different disciplines of even dance, from the ballet to modern to jazz. We have different equipment and different funding available to us institutionally. So
thank you for saying that. Yes.
We need to recognize that. I mean, one institution may, if you're working with maybe a university that has more money in the equipment that you could go into a studio and do this. Right. And one company may have that. And you may be a freelance artist that doesn't have access to that kind of institutional equipment, right? So we have to look at that too sometimes, yeah.
We have to take in those considerations. And I think we're at that place. I think we're at that place of taking in some of those considerations. I think we just need to consider taking those considerations more. And I just, it was something that I think we all touched upon the language being the most successful part of the proposal, but also too, I mean, when we're in I want people to understand that the process of talking about proposals behind the scenes is the commitment of the individuals who are looking at the proposals is pretty profound. I mean, these are not short 2-sentence proposals that we're receiving. There's a lot of material to go through. So what would we tell people though in the process that it's not an instantaneous thumbs up or thumbs down, that there's robust discussion? Let's talk about the process. When we see applications, you're in the room. What do you hear and see and observe in the conversations about proposals?
Well, I want to speak to that too. There is one other thing I just want to touch on quickly, and it's something April just said that kind of was a trigger for me, and that was, talking about money, and just thinking about budget. The budget that you are, including with your proposal, and the type of preparation that goes into preparing a reasonable, attainable budget, and looking at, and this is one of the questions that comes up during the proposal discussion during the panel meeting is this a budget that can actually support this program? Is there alignment? Can you actually, is it too ambitious and the budget's not going to support it? Or they're asking for some wild number and it just really doesn't jive with what you're asking for. So, so really take time to research, even if it means looking at, older proposals, finding proposals, requesting maybe even proposals from other organizations, kind of really look at that budget and create a budget that's really going to support that project that's going to impress your panel. And then thinking about the panel process itself, it is really so intense because talk about preparation, the panelists are given generally about 6-ish weeks to prepare to get those applications. And generally we try to provide maybe around 7 applications per panelist because they are pretty thick applications. I mean, they're digitally distributed, but there's a lot to read. And even though we ask for a word count in each section, there's still a lot to read. The actual narratives, the support materials, the budget, of course, all those various components of the application. So then the panelists have to have that time to be prepared and to look through all that information, to take notes, and then to come back together, to bring those notes, to bring their open minds to have this discussion about each application, strengths and weaknesses, what worked, what didn't work. And I've heard many comments about people saying, it reads beautifully, it was a joy to read. Other times they'll say, well, it's a nice idea, but, in talking about what didn't work, there's usually a primary panelist and a secondary panelist. So that whole process. So you know that you're being looked at, by two people who are really taking time to digest and take apart that application. And then the rest of if it's a group of 7, the other 5 chime in. So you can know that your application is really getting a lot of really good attention, and then the discussion, there's an ebb and flow. You might start out getting some really positive feedback from somebody, and then somebody over here says, but I don't know, what about this? And then it kind of goes in a different direction. And then there's a coalition building. So you got 3 who like it and 4 who don't, but another 4. So it's a lot of back and forth, but it's a fascinating project, a fascinating process. And you learn a lot as an applicant. You learn a lot about how people think. And so that if you don't get funded this time, you learn about what to do next time, and hopefully there will be a next time, and you'll come back and reapply.
I love that. From the 3 of you, would you recommend as a working artist that we all should at some point serve on a panel of some sort of application process? Oh, see, there are nods of agreement. Yes, because I think, and it was interesting because Emily brought up a question, like how being on the site, because like I said, we've all applied. I know we've all applied for funding and or project support in our day lives as art makers and creators. By starting on the other side, what changed? What changed your perception of the process and or how you saw this sort of funding model that we use in this country for funding the arts? What changed?
That's an interesting question, Rodney. I'm trying to go back to think about the panels I sat on and when I actually also sent in a proposal as an artist. And I can tell you that what changed for me after sitting in Arts Council panels and looking at proposals was that people tend to be interested in storytelling. The narrative is really important. And if the narrative supports the concept or vice versa, and then that concept, the narrative, is supported by the support materials that we look at and visually see, then we finally look at how does that budget support all of that. And so tying all of that in together as one package and not separate pieces all over the place is really what I learned by sitting on a panel, that it has to be a cohesive package, right? And not just separate things that we're just throwing out there, that may sound good and look good, but really don't have any through line or story that flows from the concept to the narrative, to the support materials, the visuals, to the budget.
Wow.
Yes, April. I will also say, just coming from another point, the term gatekeeper is so true because I've sat on panels and I've read things and I've just been, oh, this is deep. This is going into like cultural and history and all of these things. And, some of my colleagues who are not Black, completely lost because they don't have the cultural understanding. There's no awareness. And this has happened several times where I've just been almost taken aback. I've had people say, what is African diaspora? And you're sitting on a panel, right? You're reading people's work. So just, when April, I think it was you that mentioned earlier, both of you mentioned, who's sitting and who's reading it's such a major thing of who can actually, be the gatekeeper, so to speak. It's a lot that changed my perspective completely about submitting my work and using language that I think, right? We always talk about code switching. It's sometimes you have to do some code switching in your writing as well for your proposal, because you don't know, unless you're writing for a Black organization, you don't know who might be reading, and you don't want to make those kind of assumptions. So that is something that really changed my perspective of even how I write, and how I write for academia as well. And then, of course, yes, again, the budget. Yeah. How you crunch those numbers is so important. Yes.
You gotta crunch the numbers, are right. And I'm glad you said that about when we talked about gatekeeping, because in this process for selecting Countess's proposal, as president of the board of OhioDance, I'm an African American male, and I know that when Emily approached, it was an intentionality that we had to consider, that the individuals who would be selecting the work needed to come from the African diaspora. We needed to come from the Black experience, being African American and being Black. And we know we do that. And so that intentionality, I think it was really critical. It was a little weird for me because I even said, I was like, now I actively thought in my head, I know the artists, as some of the artists that are applying would be applying because I'm the president of OhioDance. There's no way to escape it. But we knew for the two of you that it would be, your credentials speak for themselves. Your work speaks for itself. Who you are, the essence of who you are, speaks for yourself. Chiquita, you know this, and so it becomes unassailable. So it made this process really cool. That being said, because we talked a little bit about calluses and how it made us all feel joy. I mean, not to keep piling on accolades to countess. What was one thing, even from her conversation or artist talk? What was one thing that stuck out to you, that really stuck out to you in a profound way about the essence of basically Countess?
I will say the one thing that I remember from her proposal and tonight is she said the regality, right? So really having this connection to the space, not just researching, David Drixel and the workshop, but also the space in which she's sharing the work, right? So she talked about the Great Hall and the idea of it having this regality, which is Afrofuturism for her. So this is like clearly thought out. And and she put the image in her proposal. I remember seeing it in the proposal. And so, that really stood out to me as, okay, this is something that she really is envisioning as part of what Afrofuturism is for her.
Oh.
Yeah, I agree with that totally, Tamara. She, whether you're from a Black-centered experience or a non-Black-centered experience, the breadth of your experiences as a human being speaks through your proposal and through your support materials. Mm-hmm. And her breadth of experience, whether it's through her travels or her work with DCDC or her mentorship or menteeship in terms of her own work with students or choreography or her own performance career, that as many experiences you have, whatever cultural centrification they are, if they are broad, they're going to within your proposal. And it's not going to be a narrow centered proposal. And your support materials are not going to be narrowly centered. And I always look at that too. How broad is this artist? How broad is their depth of experience? How deep is their experience? Where have they been? What are they saying? Where are they going? Where do they want to go? A lot of this is about, as Afrofuturism. Where do they see the vision of Black culture going? And where do they see it as being now? And do they have that broad lens to be able to look at that? Some people are not yet in their journey there. They're not there. They're in a different step in their journey. So it's not that their work is bad. It's just that they're not yet there in terms of their experiences in that journey to take that next step in a project maybe such as this. And that really tells when you're looking at this kind of a project with the Cincinnati Art Museum, because this is a broad project. This is a project for some artists who have stepped out there, who have worked with multiple kinds of, in this case, dancers, who have looked at art, visual art, who work with spoken word artists like Countess does, who has worked with original music and sound. So this is a broad experience, right? And you can see that in terms of what Tamara said, the thought behind the work and the proposal.
Yes, that spoke to me as well, sort of the multidisciplinary aspect of it, that she does bring in all those pieces, dance being considered a visual art as well as a movement art. And then the music and the spoken word, which really resonates with me. It just does. You're like, I'm like, okay, tell me the date and the time, and I'll be driving to Cincinnati. Okay. But that, and then the fact that she's got this great team, and and all the connections, the family connections. I mean, it's just so perfectly cohesive. And then it's hopeful. I remember thinking back to, years and years ago, we would watch those, when there was black and white TV was still a thing, and they would do these futuristic programs. And even though it was black and white, you didn't see much black. You didn't see,
Lieutenant Uhura. That was it.
Finally, that was the first time. And she was one of the few, maybe the only one, right? So the hopefulness of knowing that, yes, we can look toward a Black future. And that was a quote, and I was trying to write it down, and then she said something else that was profound. But presentation is important to, did she say presentation is important to projection or something to that effect? But the idea of that, no, it was preservation. Preservation is important to projection. So the idea of preserving our past so that we can project, and I hope I'm getting this right, project on into the future. That's just very hopeful for me. That gives us something to look forward to. It's like, yeah, we're going to be there. Look out. We're there. We're coming. We're going to be there.
I what it spoke to, and I think universally these are I agree with all of you, was that it spoke to me about, there was a line that I heard that my creativity does not have to be a reflection of my pain, but of my joy. And her creativity was about joyousness, regality. Like we are in these hallowed marble halls with these ionic columns, which I'm getting wrong. I'm sure some art historian will say, those are not those kind of columns, or they might be Doric, I don't know. But let's just say they're Romanesque. And so that doesn't always lend itself to our presence. And so that was what was really important. And I agree about the broadness. And I want to say this to all of those who are applying, that broadness comes from, don't be afraid to pick up and read things that you are not comfortable with. Don't be afraid to watch a film that may be in another language. Don't be afraid to have conversations with artists in other disciplines. Get to know them, because it informs, like April said, to the broadness of what you can speak to, because you're having these experiences that really support and elevate who you are as an artist and use that for you. So I just wanted to chime in that one. I'm always
Rodney, I think that's a great, Rodney, I love what you just said about the synchronization of cultures within the museum and the spaces, and what we're bringing into that space with Countess's work around Black-centered work. That's a meeting of two cultures, the space and the project. And that's a very important, dialogue, because when you're going into a space that is not of your culture, and you're bringing your culture into that space, work within that space that may not look like a Black-centered space or feel like a Black-centered space, that is a very interesting dynamic when you're creating a work in that space as a Black artist. So that's a very interesting construct that you brought up there, because I was thinking about the same thing when Countess was talking tonight and when I read her work. How are the Black artists going to do that within the spaces, within the place of the Cincinnati Museum? Because I've been to the Cincinnati Museum. We've all been there. And sometimes those Western museums don't always, feel like we can bring our work in there on the walls, maybe, but this is a different context. This is in movement, in body, in word, in music. Yes. So it's a very interesting thing to think about that and how you're going to do that. And for me, Countess's work spoke to that very deeply in her proposal, how she was going to bring the Black culture into that space, and how she was going to use it within that space and create a whole new dynamic within that space.
Yes, and that's what brought us joy. I mean, we're all smiling. I mean, the possibilities, and I think that was really what was really important for the museum and OhioDance. I always believe the possibilities are endless, especially when we're in a multidisciplinary sense. And she hit it. She nailed it. What amazed me the most was that, and I don't know if many of you know, she talked about it, that she had been working on a piece that just premiered at DCDC, and she worked with a brother. That was stunning. I had the ultimate good fortune to see the work. I just went, oh, this is a new voice. She's ready. But she made something so so epic and such a huge scale. And she submitted this proposal at the same time. I'm like, I'm blown away. I'm absolutely blown away. I know she's capable of so many amazing things because it's there. It's there. And so I as we come over, I think we're winding up to hopefully some questions from the audience and because we're almost to the end of the hour. But that's a really important thing. It's an important factor that you're doing the work and you're applying and you have to approach this from a multi-pronged approach. As educators, as an educator, I always say to my students, this is a 24/7 proposition. Even how you wash the dishes, when you wash the dishes, when you cook dinner is going to affect how you make work. This is your thing. So, and Emily said that there are questions in the chat from the audience. Questions from the audience. That's awesome. Let's ask away. And Countess is coming in. I know, Countess, I know. We're just singing your praises and lots of love for you, which is, you're pretty amazing. So, wow.
I am coming in just for convenience because I was typing this over to you, Rodney, and then that seemed very silly because here I am. So
there we go. Yes.
So you have all touched on this, but could you talk a bit about ways for folks to learn and recover from that first no, and maybe even that second no that may come because maybe the project wasn't quite right, or maybe the proposal wasn't quite there, but do you have advice for helping that to be a continued learning journey?
I'll just start by saying it's always good, I just think as a practice as an artist anyways, is to have a mentor, especially if this is maybe your first or second time, having someone who's had some experience that can give you, okay, these are the things that you should be doing, that you should be working on. But then you also want some resources and tools. I actually quite often, I go to the Library of Congress and I look up proposals and I look up budgets and it's available. So use what's available to you. We have a local arts and science council here and they give workshops. I know they may not be available to everyone in every city, but if you do, we're in this time of Zoom, maybe you can apply, look and see what's available around and maybe apply. I know Dance NYC Symposium has like workshops and things like that. Sometimes they're low cost. So I would just say, look and see what resources are also available for writing, for learning more about grant writing and opportunities for grant writing, and have a mentor.
Awesome. There's a question, a comment in the audio, in the chat. The Ohio Arts Council, has an open panel meetings, which means the public can view the process. Do you recommend that applicants observe these conversations? Because it is an open public forum.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. People have learned so much, about either coming in person when we could do that, but coming in person to a panel meeting. We, of course, have been for the last couple of years offering, virtual panel meetings, but we always provide the link to the panel. You're not able to actually engage with the panelists, but you can certainly listen into the comments. So we encourage people, highly encourage people to do that. And I'll also mention that the Ohio Arts Council also provides workshops. Workshops are available, and those are also promoted on our website. We also have a YouTube channel where we have archived workshops that have happened in the past. So that kind of, that tool is available. So, go to the Ohio Arts Council website. Ton of information there.
Which goes back to your comment that we should be looking at who we're asking for money from. Go to their website. Go to the
website, get that information. Yeah. And then just one last thing is it's not personal. It really is not personal. We talk about being an artist and having a thick skin, and I work on that myself, and it's like, oh, another rejection. But then the yes is coming. The yes, just keep doing it. Just keep doing it. Get the percentages on your side, and learn and make it happen.
So this is a question for Countess. When presented with a new potential project, where does it all start for you? Where do you begin? Like, Yeah, what do you? Where's your head at in that game?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I think it depends on the project. Like what I was saying was when I read this proposal, I was like, oh my gosh, I've already got ideas. I'm so excited. I was just already excited about it. But if it were something different that maybe I hadn't thought about before, or, I don't know, it always shifts. Like, for instance, the piece that I did with DCDC that you were referring to, I had no clue what it was going to be about. Now, luckily, I had 2 years to make it, but it took the 2 years to really narrow down what the piece was going to be about. So it depends. I think it has depended on where I am in my life. And what I've started to try to do as an artist is as soon as I have an idea for a piece, I just write it down. I just put it in my phone under my notes or something. And I just kind of accumulate different things that inspire me, or that I'm like, oh, maybe I'll make a piece about that one day, or maybe I'll explore this one day. So sometimes I know immediately, and then sometimes I just be waiting on all the spirits to come and tell me how to move and where to move.
Don't we all?
Yeah, right. So it depends. Long story short.
I love it. So anybody else with the word similar process or different process about where to begin with presenting new work? Because we're all working artists, which is really interesting to me. We all work and we do these other things. So anyone?
Well, I find journaling is really helpful to me. I mean, journaling is a big part. I will wake up in the middle of the night with an idea and write it down in a book. A thought will come to me, or a piece of music I'll hear, and that will inspire me to write something down. So journaling for me is really important, to get my ideas down on paper and then go back and read them later. I will also say for me that speaking with other choreographers, if I'm doing a choreographic work, or other artists, visual artists or musicians, having a coffee, a dialogue with artists who have submitted proposals that were successful, and us talking together is always so informative to me. And whether that be much more mature and experienced artists, like I've had many conversations with Catherine Dunham about her proposals and that, or it's a younger artist who's emerging and fresh and new, and I want to get that perspective of how are they thinking. That has always inspired me to go back and look at my work and think about, what my process is and how I'm entering that process based on the work.
I agree about journaling. I write pretty much every day, and started out years ago with a book called The Artist's Way, and that's still a big part of my life. Those practices of, morning pages and artist dates and walks, all of that, and I'm also a greedy reader. So as a writer, you get so whether it's poetry, whether it's fiction, nonfiction, plays, all of that, and of course I love all the arts. I love the dance, I love the theater. So it's just taking it all in, because cross-fertilization is a real thing that happens. So all of y'all inspire me, and then hopefully we inspire each other.
I think and all the head nods, all journal. I know I am sticking in images, I'm collaging, I'm writing on it, I'm writing notes, I hear music, it's all in there. It's just thick with glue and just stuff. And I don't know where it's going to lead, but I know I need to preserve the ideas, because I'm installing a museum exhibit now, and it's just visual art. And so that's very new to me. When can I dance? When do I need to bring some dancers into the room? No, you can't. It's just the art.
And those journals are going to become your archives, your famous archives one day.
Yes. Oh, yes. I believe in the archives. Oh, do I ever. I love it. Well, we're at time. This is why I wanted us to have this conversation with the public, because this is what happens behind the scenes. We get together as not that we're gatekeeper, but as panelists and adjudicators and artists. We get together, we're sharing ideas, we're providing new perspectives and new thoughts. And we may have the distance, but we have the connection. And I just really appreciate that. And that's what I wanted to share through this process. And I think we did. So I thank each and every one of you. It's awesome. Somehow on this is really cool. I love it. I just wanted people to see this stuff.
I am going to echo Rodney's thank you to all of you so much for your participation. This has been really impactful for me, and I hope for our audience as well, I'm sure. Thank you to our audience members. And I'd also like to thank Executive Director for OhioDance, Jane D'Angelo, whose collaboration and continued support have been incredible. And finally, I will thank DeMarco Payton, who is facilitating the technology for both parts of tonight's program. So everyone at home, please do check CincinnatiArtMuseum.org to find out information about registering to come to be with us for the May 6th performance of Homage, What Was, Is to Come. I look forward to seeing so many folks there. And again, thank you. Take care, everyone.
All right. Well, wonderful evening.